Awesome. Welcome, everybody. If you are remote and can hear me, can you drop a note in the chat? And Kat can verify that you can all hear me and see our screen here. So I have the pleasure of coming to you live from the event here in Arlington. And I'm going to be walking you through a little bit about how to unleash the power of the data in your online community. And that's the whole theme of the show, right? Is the online community has lots of data, tends to be locked up in there, and we want to unlock it. So I'm not going to be talking technically as much how do we do it. I'm going to be talking more strategy-wise. How can we think about using this data from a non-community manager perspective? Because we know the community has lots of valuable data, but the non-community managers don't always know that. I'm also going to be talking about how you as community managers can use the data to drive your community engagement, to make your community thrive. But you can also use it to make sure that the experiences your community members are having are on point, and we'll finish up with some fun talk about ROI. Who is this Greg and why should I listen to him? Well, I've been working in the association nonprofit world my entire career. You can see I was a serious businessman back in the day attending trade shows. I was actually employee number 40 at this small community company called Higher Logic way back in the day. If you look at that middle picture, that's their old logo that you might have never even seen. And I now work at a company called Association Analytics, and we help associations leverage their data. And our office is literally next door. In my personal life, I like to drive Miatas around. It's a lot of fun. Why do I have any community credentials? I have been a community nerd since way back in the day when if you wanted to go to a forum, you had to go to Yahoo and play chess with people to chat with them. I don't know why that's what we had to do back in the day. I was an original user of dig.com. I got to meet Kevin Rose back in the day before he ruined it. And then I switched over to Reddit in 2011 and have been there ever since. I'm a huge fan of YouTube. I'm not a reader for content. I'm more of a video for content. So I love creating video content. And I'm almost up to 70 subscribers. That'll be a big milestone in my life when I get there. Right? But you gotta keep putting content out there. So what's the whole point of our conversation today is people have questions, right? It's not how many posts did we have this month. It's not who's the newest member of our community. I can run a report and get that. We have a lot harder questions we need to answer, right? It's like, does the community impact our membership? How can the events team leverage our community? What is marketing doing with all the data we've been creating? And unfortunately, the answer is locked up in a lot of these systems. Now, every piece of software you'll ever interact with has out-of-the-box reports, but they typically answer the what has happened, right? So imagine you're the events person and you're running the event report and you notice registrations are down. It's like, what am I supposed to do about that? You're like, well, I'm the community person. I don't care about the event. Well, actually, if we start to dig into the data and we say, well, why are registrations down? Is it repeat attendees? Is it a specific demographic? It's potential first-time attendees are down. And we're looking around our ecosystem. We're like, where might we find more first-time attendees? Do we see them in our marketing tool? Are they on our webinars? And the actual answer is these potential first-time attendees have been hanging out in your online community all along, and it's our job to be able to connect them with the event so we can get them to experience the value that we're delivering, right? Now, while we're going about this, we're starting to ask more questions about this, and we actually learned that our community members are spending more and they're renewing at a higher rate than everybody else in the organization, and we can use this as a flag to say, look at all these exciting things the community is delivering to everybody else in the organization. And that's a real world example. That's our friend over at ASE, Reggie Henry. They actually were able to leverage their community data to not only determine that people who use the community participate more and spend more, but they also use it for all these other things. And we'll be talking about some examples about how they use community data to drive events. I run reports all the time and I give them to my boss. And every time I give him a report, he asks me another question about that data. He never sees the full picture of what I'm trying to tell him. Because I run multiple reports, I put that data in Excel and I make a pretty picture out of it and I show him the report. And all he sees is on the left. He sees the pieces of the puzzle. But because he's not there day to day in the community running it, he never sees the full picture of what's happening, right? So reporting is all about taking all those blocks and putting them in neat little organized rows. But when we get to analytics, we see that we really built a Lego house, right? That's what we're actually doing with our community. And it's not until we use analytics that we can fully transform our data into information, that we can use it to tell a story. And our goal with analytics is to tell a story. How do we do that? We follow this simple process. We collect and organize all the data from multiple places, blending all that together in what's called a data warehouse and a data lake. We organize all that data, we visualize it, and the most important two here are we analyze it and act. If you look at a dashboard and go, yep, that happened, you're not doing analytics, you're doing fancy reporting. You have to look at the dashboard and go, aha, I actually understand what I'm supposed to do with this. It puts it in context, it gives me the inspiration to say, this is what I need to be doing now that I've seen that. Let's talk about not community managers for a minute. It's a weird topic to bring up at a community management course. But I think that the community data is highly valuable for the non-community managers, and we can be the conduit to them to help them understand what the valuable data is. We talked about marketers. What is the biggest challenge marketers have? It's really hard to listen to what people want. Where's a key example of where we can go to listen to what people are talking about? The online community, right? People are literally telling us what they want if we're only listening. But it can be really challenging to listen, especially if you have a massive community with thousands of conversations. How are you supposed to listen to every one of those conversations and give it back to the other teams so they can leverage it? What about sentiment analysis? What if we can take every one of those conversations and run it through a natural language processing tool and come out with a sentiment, positive, neutral, or negative a connotation? Now, sentiment analysis gets a bad rap because this negative a connotation in the community world is misunderstood, right? A lot of times people say, well, if it's a negative conversation, we've got to moderate it. We've got to get that person out of our community. We've got to turn that conversation off and delete it. The exact opposite is what I'm recommending with negative conversations. So when we're scanning all of our data and we see these conversations with negative sentiment, what I really see is an opportunity. I see our members are talking about a challenge. They're frustrated. They can't, how do I figure this out? What am I supposed to do here? All of this comes back from our natural language processing as negative sentiment analysis. People are upset. There's friction in the community, right? And what is it our job to do is to help solve those challenges people have. I see this as an opportunity. So we're actually working with an organization now, and they looked at negative sentiment in their community. This is an online educator association. And they're international, and they see this online I-765 guidance, right? People are trying to apply for these international visas as teachers, and they're struggling with it. So this organization leveraged their community data. The community person got up and walked over to the programming department, and they said, do we have any content related to I-765 guidance? Do we have any case studies or white papers or guides for them? And they said, yeah, we have this one pager. They walked over to the marketing team and they said, can we send this to all these specific types of members? Because they've been complaining about how hard this is. And they got that email out to them right away and were able to answer the questions they had in real time. They went over to the membership department and they said, hey, can we talk about this as a member benefit? That we're listening to the challenges our members have and we're solving those challenges. What a crazy world where multiple departments collaborated together on the same piece of data. But it didn't involve reading every conversation that ever happens in a community. It's way too much, right? We've got to be able to skim off the exciting things, and we've got to be able to serve them up to the right departments. Now, a real big key here is analytics can be used as a language. The community person didn't walk over to the programming team and say, I think that people have this challenge. I feel like a lot of people are struggling with this. They brought up this chart and they said, look, the number 1 and 3 problem people have are this. What are we supposed to do about that? And the programming department said, oh, I have this great idea. We can get ahead of that. And the community department said, what a great idea. I'm so glad you thought about that. So we change our ask from, hey, can you fix this problem? Can you get this out? To look at this challenge we see. Does anybody have any solutions out there? Right? So we're using analytics as a language. We not only want to listen to what they're talking about, we want to observe what they're doing, what they're searching for. And search terms can be really hard to understand, but there's a couple easy ways to look at them. I'm a huge fan of the bubble chart personally. For me as a human, I think this makes a lot of sense to my brain, right? What if we took all the search terms in the community and we were easily able to visualize them, right? Now we can understand what are people's actual challenges in the community. I don't just want to know what people's challenges are. I want to know what specific people's challenges are. So on the right, I used my filter panel here And I said, only tell me what C-level executives are talking about. Tell me what their challenges are. Because believe it or not, we have a C-level executive retreat coming up in a couple weeks, and I'm terrible at writing subject lines. How are we going to tell these C-level executives they should come, right? We're going to say things like, hey, we're focused on diversity and inclusion, and we have a DEI consultant coming to the conference. Do you think you want to attend? I'm no longer guessing that this is what these people want. I'm letting the data direct my decisions and show me which direction I should head in. Now, I'm a huge fan of these bubble charts because I think they make sense to my brain, but the data analyst in my life tells me that I'm wrong and I shouldn't look at data this way. She tells me I should look at data this way, right? Because while it might pop up and it might look like mentoring platforms are the hot topic we should talk about, what I fail to see in my bubble charts is that's just a blip on the radar for a day or two, right? But this type of visualization allows me to actually see is here, ChatGPT. This just didn't happen once. This happened multiple times over multiple weeks. This has been a topic that's been going on in my community for a while, right? So the different types of visualizations we choose help tell a different type of story with our data. And when we look at search terms, looking at it over time to see how prevalent that search term is, not just today, but last week, the week before, the month before, that's going to tell me, is this an actual trend or is this just a hot topic of the day, right? We've all seen that discussion thread that blows up for one day and it might show up to the top of the list on our report. This was a hot topic for one, but then we see that all these other topics are sort of buried in the weeds, but multiple people have been talking about them on multiple threads for months now. This type of visualization can really help you with that. What does this look like in action? I mentioned our friends over at ASAE. We can see if we go to their website, about membership, their categories, their resources, their professional development, they're highlighting their online community. All of that stuff comes from data, right? You can literally track what people are doing in the community and how they talk to their members. Their member categories are specifically broken up with how their people in the community talk. Their documents that they share, these are the hot topics that you care about and you want to see. They're getting that insight because people in the community are downloading these things, right? They're letting the behavior direct their actions. They're saying if people in the community love this stuff, then our potential next member might love that as well. I mentioned online communities. I'm a huge fan of those. The other thing I'm really passionate about are events. That's one of the reasons I wanted to be here in person, because I think physical events are never going away, right? I remember back in the 2007, we were building a mobile app for trade shows and we put this chat feature in it. And we built networking tools for trade shows, and they were like, the trade show is going to go away if people can just talk to each other. I was like, the trade show's not going to go away. They're going to talk before the show, they're going to talk after the show, but they're going to interact in person at the show, right? Why do we have Reddit meetups? We can talk online all the time, but we want to see each other in person. That's why we want to meet. Now, the community isn't the opposite of a physical event. The community augments the physical event. But if you're not on the event team, you don't know how to use a community correctly. Right? The event team's probably not going to walk over to you and say, hey, can we spin up an event community? They're not going to have that idea. So one of the things we as community managers need to do is go to those departments and make proactive recommendations. Did you know event communities are really popular? Oh, I never thought about that. Why would I have an event community? Well, we can get people talking ahead of time. We can get prospects at the event interested in attending. We can identify who our key attendees are. We can make people feel welcome. Right? That's why we should have an event community. So before the event, we encourage our keynote speaker to go in and do an Ask Me Anything. Right? Have you ever been to the conference and you see the keynote speaker and you're like, who is this? Why am I going to this keynote? I'm just going to go hang out outside the session instead. But if the keynote speaker didn't ask me anything ahead of time, you'd feel a part of that conversation. Now the keynote speaker is giving her speech and you're like, she's really inspirational. I remember talking to her in the community ahead of time, right? But we can also extend the life cycle of our event. It's not just who met at the event, it's those missed conversations after the event. It's getting back together and talking online about what we did. So we can use data at the event in all types of ways. Higher Logic Superforum's coming up. Hopefully I'll see you there. This is their event community from a couple years ago where they encouraged people to go talk in the community ahead of time. Right? They were like, hey, if you're coming to Superforum, you should be in our community talking to all the other attendees. These sound dumb, but they work so well. Hey, I'm coming to the event. Who else is coming? I saw this one thread in the community once, and it was, I've never been to the event before. Does anybody want to get together and have a drink? Are there any good breweries in the area? And like, this thread completely blew up in their conversation, right? Hundreds of people jumped on this conversation and said, yeah, I've never been to the event either. I want to meet new people. I love breweries. Let's go get connected, right? This was the biggest thing this event had going, and it was just an accident in their online community. Now, we know as community managers, it wasn't an accident. It was a seed question, right? Somebody started that topic and got it going, but the attendees didn't know that, but they all felt really welcome. Now, when we go to our event team and we're like, hey, our community can make attendees feel more welcome at the event. Our community can help get people registered and excited about it. Should we start an event community? They're like, that's a great idea. We should totally do that. How does this help our revenue, though? The sponsorship team. They're always trying to get the sponsors' information out there, their videos, their content, their PDFs, right? So now we're in our community, we're posting all those logos, all those videos, all those product descriptions. This now becomes search content for later. This becomes a discussion post around the exhibitors, right? So the event community isn't just for the attendees, it's for the sponsors, it's for the exhibitors, it's for the speakers. Have a speaker-only community. I've never spoken before at this event. What am I supposed to dress? Do people wear jackets and suits when they speak, or do they wear casual attire? Do I have to bring my own pen drive, or are you going to have them there? Right? Is the PowerPoint available afterwards? Yeah, you upload it to the community ahead of time. Right? So there's all these use cases where an online community becomes a tool that helps augment that physical event. And we as community managers can be proactive and recommend these solutions to our event community and our event team, because they don't know about this stuff. They're not going to come ask for this, but we know that this is proactive community management. We want to go on offense with our community. We already talked about this a little bit, but creating just-in-time content is huge, right? This is a really interesting example from a couple years ago where the topic force majeure came up, right? This was during the pandemic when all these organizations rented hotels, and the events team had a contract for the hotel, and they're like, hey, how do we get out of this contract? No one's coming. Well, ASAE was examining this data, and they sent us an email, and they said, hey, everybody, did you know we have a webinar about legal strategies for meetings? Right? Their events team didn't guess that we wanted this content. They used the data from their community to drive the content they were creating. So this is a good example of just-in-time content. If we see a hot topics blowing up in the community, we can take that over to our event team and say, hey, here's a problem people have. Let's help solve that problem. If you were at Tech back in 20, you might have taken a look at the schedule and noticed there was a theme and a topic that hit over and over again. People were talking about data, and you can't see it over there. There you go. People were talking about data, right? So there was a data science fair. There was how do you have data ethics? There was putting data into action. There was data visualizations. There was predictive analytics. There was ultimate data challenge. There were all these data things happening at the tech conference. Now, why did they have all these things happening at the tech conference? Because they looked in their community and they noticed all of these tech people were talking about data. So they created content sessions that were highly relevant for those people. How did they find speakers for those events? It's really hard to find a speaker for your event. Mm-hmm. What if you could look at your community like this? Each one of these dots is a person. And the lines that connect those dots are the interactions they have had in your online community. Who are we potentially going to invite to be a speaker? It's that person right there. They were actually a speaker at that conference, primarily because they were able to identify them as a community influencer, right? We all have heard this term influencer. It's not a new term. Community influencer and network mapping has been around forever, and you can access this in your community. You can analyze the interactions and create influencer maps and invite those people to be speakers at your upcoming conference, because if they're talking in the community and people like it, there's a good chance they can talk on stage and people will like it. It's also probably a good recruitment tool, right? If you're in the community and you see this person talking all the time, and the events team emails you and said, hey, did you know that Tirza is going to be talking at this conference coming up? And, oh, I know her. I see her in the community all the time. Of course I want to go see her speak in person, right? We can connect the offline and the online world. And I think that's a really important part. Period space. Community managers. Here are a few of my favorite community managers. Data for the community manager, right? Every community manager I've ever talked to has one of these. And sometimes we put Power BI in front of these as well. But we still have a challenge. I've got to go into the community. I've got to run a report. I've got to plug that data into my Excel spreadsheet, right? I talked with the community manager last year, and I said, what happens when you show your boss that Excel spreadsheet? And she says, Greg, if the numbers go up, my boss tells me I'm doing a good job. And if the numbers go down, my boss yells at me and tells me to work harder. And I was like, and what does that mean? She's like, it means absolutely nothing. None of these metrics tell my team what's actually happening. It just, I get yelled at or not. And I said, there's a few problems. One is we're not putting any of this data in context. If I told you in December that our community activities dipped, you go, Greg, why is the community not active? December. The community's never active in December. People go on holiday, they're on vacation, they're not in my online community. Let me put that number in context for you, because I don't expect a whole lot of discussions. What I do expect is when we come out of the winter and we get springtime, people will be back in the online community again, everything's okay. So we actually use a term for these, they're called vanity metrics. A vanity metric is a number that you report on right now, and when you tell your boss this number, nothing happens. They don't make any decisions. No one changes their behavior based on this, right? So putting numbers in context is key. Now there's probably too many metrics in the community to fit on that Excel spreadsheet, right? And as we're identifying things in our community, we might want to look at lots of major buckets of activity, and we might want to look at how those buckets of activity shift over time. If our community joins and views are going up, does that mean our profile is going up and our agreed to terms are going up, right? If our community activity is going up, does that mean our discussions and library activities are going up? Maybe they are, maybe they're not. So putting those things in context and comparing them to each other is key. I can't just say we had a lot of library downloads this month. Of course you did. A lot of people joined the community and they started to proactively search for stuff. That's why that number went up. So when we look at these numbers, they're not all happening in a vacuum by themselves. They're all interconnected, right? The joins impacts the profile, impacts the discussion, impacts the library. They're all interconnected. And if we're just looking at a number in an Excel spreadsheet, we're not able to understand and put that in context with each other. When we look at a specific community as well, we might want to look at the health and behavior of that community. So we might want to look at what type of things do people do in this community? Is it going up or is it going down? I often analyze communities and notice we have a lot of communities we need to retire. We have over-segmented our online community. We've created 95 subgroups because every chapter needed their own subgroup and region. But you had one discussion in there in the last 2 months. This is not a healthy community. We've got to retire this and get you back to the main community. This isn't a good subgroup, right? And as a community manager, that's a really hard conversation to have, right? Hey, I'm turning your chapter community off. You're just not getting a lot of activity there. Can I show you what's happening over time? And can I encourage you to wrap that in with the major community? Because let me show you all the activity that's happening over here. I think your members want to be a part of that larger community. Again, we're using analytics as a language. We're not saying, I think your community sucks and we need to turn it off, right?
This is proof.
Look at the data. What do you think we should do? I really care about the members in your chapter. How do we help facilitate their engagement? Should they be here or should they be over here, right? Community churn is something that's pretty interesting. So if I look at something like every month I get new community members, new people join, I want to have seed questions ready for them. I want to have content relevant for the new members of my community. But who are the new members of my community? I can get like a report with their names in it. That's not very helpful. What if we were able to just click on that data? So I clicked on July 2022. We had 922 new members join, and it turns out that 211 of them were director level positions, right? Lucky for me, I'm using Higher Logic. I've got automation rules. What do you think the welcome message for those directors should be? Hey, directors, did you know we have a community over here relevant for you? As directors, you're going to want to have these type of conversations. If those type of things are interesting to you, you should come over here and join this community, right? So we're no longer just automating our way out of the problem. We're letting the data drive the automation. If we're going to use the automation rules, which you should You shouldn't just use the generic out-of-the-box rule with the template that Jenny wrote 10 years ago. You should tune that. I was there and she wrote. You should tune that to your data, to your people, not just to your people overall, but to like your people this month, right? Like, what is the automation rule this month? What should it say? It should say, hey, we have an upcoming AMA, and directors like you are really interested in this document over here. Come in the community and check out this document. I bet you're going to like it. I think one of my favorite parts about HigherLogic's community platform that's underutilized is the content management system. It's a full content management system which allows you to change literally every community breakdown. Every community can have its own custom landing page. And if you're working with my friend Martha Jack, she's an expert at that. I highly recommend talking to her about it.
Oh, you know, she's HigherLogic now.
I heard about that. Yeah. I'm super excited.
Shout out.
So how do I fine-tune each community to the type of experience my members want in that community? These are really interesting visualizations. The different colors show me the different type of activities that people in that community are doing. And the top labels the different type of community. So I've got member interest groups. These are topical-based groups. I've got professional networking groups, right? These are areas where they're supposed to chat. And I've got regional networks. These are more like committee structures. You're in the Northwest, I'm in the Southeast. What am I supposed to do? The different colors tell me that these different groups really, really like to do different types of things, right? The member interest group wants to go to the homepage. They want to view discussions. They want to view community members. The professional network really wants to talk with each other. They're sending messages way more than the interest group, right? The interest group is sort of like a come and observe what's happening group, where the professional network is a come and chat group. And these behaviors are vastly different than this behavior in the regional network, right? The regional network isn't viewing or chatting. There's no conversations going on here at all. But I guarantee you in all of your regional network communities, the top left widget is discussions. And it has one conversation from 4 years ago that no one reads, right? Because you can't see this. So if you took your communities by type and you rearrange the content on the homepage of that community based on what people wanted to do when they got there, how would that change the way community engagement happens, right? Your regional network people would come, they would view the page, and they would download the document they want, and they'd get on with their day. That's what they want to do, right? I need the policy document for this thing. Your professional networkers, they're chatting, right? You've got the start a discussion post. You've got the here's some hot content. Where your interest groups, they're like looking at profiles and stuff. They're very different behaviors, but we give them all the same landing page. So I love the idea of using your data to fine-tune each community to be relevant for the type of things people in that type of community want to do. This can be a hard pill to swallow for people. There's an organization right over there called Promontory Interfinancial. This is a massive organization, and their members are the CFOs of banks. And I sold them a community a long time ago. And we talked about it, and they were like, we think these CFOs want to have really deep conversations about banking. I didn't say that at the time. They got our community management service. Things were going great. They called me up and they said, Greg, no one's having any conversation in the community. This is not working. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. What are people doing? I said, we don't know. I said, well, before you yell at me, let's figure out what people are doing or not doing. So we looked at the data. Everybody was getting the daily digest. Everybody was opening the daily digest. They were going from the digest into the community, and they were accessing resources and stories. And I said, your people don't want to talk to each other. Stop asking them. Your people want thought leadership. They want knowledge. They want access to information. They don't want to chat with each other. Don't force them to do something they don't want to do. So what did we do? We turned the introduce yourself automation rule off. They weren't introducing themselves. They all know who they are, right? We turned the you haven't started a discussion automation rule off. They're not trying to introduce themselves and have discussions. And we changed the way the digest worked. So every day they got the digest, there was a story and there was a document relevant to them. And their engagement went way up, right? So often, not you people, so often community managers try and force the community to do this thing we want the community to do, as opposed to letting the community tell us what we're supposed to be doing, right? If we're able to listen to what people in the community are doing, we can change our strategy and our tactics, and we can deliver the value back to them. I started with who am I, and I said I got to meet Kevin Rose way back in the day. I was a huge fan of dig.com. I didn't know this at the time. When I met Kevin, he showed me Dig version 4. And Dig version 4 changed the homepage completely. Before, the stories were weighted based on the audience. How many people upvoted and downvoted a story, it would go up or down. And when they updated Dig to version 4, they gave influencers, like major brands, like major content creators like the Washington Post and the New York Times, they gave those people priority over everybody else because they were sponsors. They were paying for content. And what happened? Everybody left Dig and went to Reddit. It doesn't even exist as a platform anymore that you can actively use because they weren't listening to what their members wanted. They didn't want sponsored content. They wanted real discussions with actual people, and they ruined their community, and I was sad. All right, how do we measure the ROI on community? This is really, really tough, right? Measuring the ROI on community is really tough. I was in a session once, and someone literally said, measuring the ROI on your community is like measuring the ROI on your mom. And the speaker's whole point, you might know the speaker's whole point was you shouldn't measure the ROI on community, it's impossible to do. And I was like, this is just a cop-out because you don't know how to measure ROI on your community. That is my mom, by the way. How do you measure the ROI in community? The same way you measure the ROI on everything else. You analyze it. So what is the value of community? Well, first I have to know my retention rate. That's hard enough to do. We got to go to the membership team. We got to go ask them what that is. And then I need to say, does being in the community increase my retention rate, yes or no? I think it does. I believe that people who use the community, specifically new members, are going to renew at a higher rate. But the membership team isn't going to come ask me for that stat. They are too busy doing their own thing. The marketing team isn't going to come ask you for that stat. They're too busy doing their own thing, right? Part of our job is to say, what are the metrics that you care about, business? Because we're a business. We care about retention, great. How do I understand our retention rate and help show you that community participation can augment retention rate? That's part of what I can do. What do we care about? We care about revenue, right? We got to make money. How do I understand that our average order this year was $116 when I didn't have any community behavior selected? But when I said community behavior equals yes, our average order went up, right? We can actively show you that people who participate in the community spend more with our organizations. What a great statistic to show everybody else. Because we as community managers have a lot of feelings and thinking, but we have to translate that to the business users. They don't speak the same language we speak. They speak the language of numbers and dollars, retention rate. Those are the ways we have to translate what's happening in our community into metrics that they can understand. Now, I do think they care about this, specifically with associations and nonprofits. We care about this thing called engagement, right? Everybody wants to deeper engage their members, and a community can be a great tool to deepen engagement. But it can only be a great tool to deepen engagement if we're measuring engagement. So if we can measure engagement, and we can understand that of all the things we measure, posting in the community, commenting in the community, looking and lurking in the community is a valuable data point we want to measure, we can understand that, I know, right? This is a ribbon chart. It's really cool. It shows you things like posting and participating in the community are key attributes to engagement. And when we look at one of our best members like John's one of my fantastic members. He loves me. John participates in my community. He does these community things I want, right? It's not by accident that some of my best members participate in the community, right? It's a causation. People participate in the community because they're really good members, but they're good members because they participate in the community. Almost right on time. Key takeaways. There's a lot of value in your online community. The community data is valuable, just like my Miata. Your community data is valuable to everybody else in the organization, but they don't know how much you love your Miata unless you tell them. You've got to show them pictures of it and videos on YouTube. You got to post on Reddit about how much you love your Miata, just like your community data. You have to evangelize your community data, but you have to do it in a way that they understand, because they don't always speak the same language we speak. So we have to take that data, we have to take all those bricks, and we have to arrange them in a picture that helps them understand what they're seeing. In order to do this, we have to ask them some questions. What do you care about? What are your goals? What are you trying to accomplish? Let me show you how community data can help that. Let me help you create net new products. Did you know people are talking about this? Did you know this negative sentiment is a challenge you can help solve? Right? Did you know that event communities are great ways to boost participation? Right? Physical events are having a tough time right now. We can throw that event manager a rope and say, hey, we'll help pull you along a little bit. They're going to love that, right? Hey, let me help identify some influencers for you. But the community data is valuable for you, the community manager, right? Replace the old Excel spreadsheet. Ain't nobody got time to punch numbers in an Excel spreadsheet every week to try and figure out what's going on. I have to run my community. If we can automate that process and create beautiful dashboards, it allows you to be more effective. It allows you to curate better community experiences by using data. As much as we might not love him, why do you think Zuckerberg's been so successful with Facebook? He's got all the data on everybody. He uses it against us, right? Why do I see that ad in the community? Because I was talking about that thing. It's not just Zuckerberg that gets to do that. You can take advantage of the community as well. And it's all about proving that ROI. Because budget season's coming up. And a lot of associations are looking at their bottom line and going, we're not making as much revenue as we did last year. We got to start cutting some stuff. Do you guys know anything about this online community? Anybody here? Nobody in the room knows about the online community? Great, we're going to just redline that bad boy. We don't need that anymore. This conversation's happening in your boardroom right now, and you're not a part of it, right? If we're not evangelizing our Miata and telling everybody how much we love it and how much it benefits everybody, they're not seeing that. I want them to go, hey, but who's this online community? Actually, I'm on the events team, and this has been really helpful. They've been helping me promote my upcoming conference, and that's a major revenue driver for us. I'm on the membership team, and I can directly see that community participation increases our retention rate. You can't cut this thing, right? Everybody in there should know about how beneficial the community is, and we can help tell that story. So I go back to my initial thing. The community data is valuable, but we have to unlock it. We have to get it out of there. We have to start assembling that community data in meaningful ways so we all can use it better. Questions?
All right, so we got one. So can frequent polls in the community help drive engagement?
Yes, polls in the community can help drive engagement. However, I'd be cautious. Polls are good for a couple things. They're good at asking people what they think they want, but they're bad at understanding what people actually want, right? We've all done a poll or a survey, and people have all told us they wanted this thing, and we went out and built that thing, and no one came to see it. So be cautious with polls. It's only what people tell you. I think observed behavior is way better. Now, everybody wants to take the Cosmo quiz, right? So polls are a fun way to hook people and pull them in. And it's a fun thing to do, but the data a poll creates is a little dubious in my opinion. I would take it all with a grain of salt. I wouldn't say this is exactly what's going on. I would say this is what people told us in the poll. Let's observe their behavior and see what happens. So I like polls. I think they're fun. We should definitely have them in the community, but we shouldn't use them to drive our end result. We shouldn't say community members told us this. We're going full out and doing that. We should use it as an observation. It's a part of the data I'm collecting. Good question.
One behind you too.
Oh.
I had a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
So I had a question. You mentioned earlier on about the use of natural language processing tools
Yeah.
to understand sentiment. Could you speak a little bit more about that? What are some examples of the use of natural language processing tools, and might we be able to use that with discussion forums?
Yeah, good question. So if you couldn't hear online, the question was the use of natural language processing tools and how they can fit in communities. I'll give you the good and the bad and where we sit today. The bad is many of our communities are so niche that natural language processing is not accurate enough to get the exact thing we want to do. I was working with a big medical association, and they did natural language processing on their data, and it came back that it was related to surgeons. And they were like, yeah, everybody's a surgeon. But it couldn't pick what type of surgery you were doing, right? Because it wasn't that fine-tuned. Now, there's a really fancy tool out there called Clarabridge that does natural language processing, and there's a company called ORI you can contract with, and they will tune Clarabridge for you. But it takes a lot of effort to get this done. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying be aware that the amount of effort you're going to put in is going to be a lot because you have to put all the data in, you have to fine tune it and tweak it based on your world to get any kind of relevant answers out. That's the bad. The good is this technology is getting way better really, really fast, right? We're almost at the point where it's good enough to be able to use, and we're almost at the point where it's affordable that we can afford to pay for the natural language processing. Because if you don't have millions of dollars to be able to use it today, it can be really tough to leverage it fully. I talked about sentiment analysis as an outcome of natural language processing. This works pretty good. So we use a tool up in Amazon called Comprehend. You give it a discussion post, and it gives you a positive, neutral, or negative connotation. But you have to interpret the data. You can't just say this is negative. An example is those surgeons were talking about blood, and the natural language processing tool said this is negative. We know that's not negative. They're surgeons talking about blood. That's normal, right? So all of these tools today are good and getting better, but all of them require a human to interpret the data. So the way I think about it is our community has hundreds of thousands of conversations. I can't read and understand every one of those conversations, but I can use NLP to surface the things to the top that I, the human, do need to scan. And I scroll through and go, okay, instead of reading 100,000 conversations today, maybe I'm going to read 50 conversations today. These are the ones that got flagged. Some of them are going to get moderated because that's actually not right. You shouldn't be posting that here. Some of them are fine, and we, the humans, will understand that. And some of them need to go other places, right? This had a lot of high negative sentiment. I need to go get this to our programming team so they can solve this challenge. So they're good, and they're getting better, but I don't think they're the end-all, be-all of today. Good question.
Any other questions from the room?
Fire away.
I see a lot of conversation about like the move away from forums to more of like instant messaging kind of.
Yep.
I would see back and forth with that. Have you looked into the data of where the industry might be going?
Yeah, good question. So the question was a forum discussion versus an instant message chat discussion, right? And have I looked at the data to see what's happening there? I have looked at the data, and I see what's happening there, but it's hard to really interpret what's going on. The way I see it is there are different types of tools. I've got a flathead screwdriver, and I've got a Phillips screwdriver. One's not better than the other. One doesn't serve a better purpose. They're just different types of tools. So what I've seen is that the instant message chat, the Discord channels we're on, the real-time chat, everybody now has a group chat on their phone with 500 people on it that you can check now and then, right? That's a fun chat to be a part of, but it's not as informal, it's not as informational of a chat. It's hard to go back and search for that. It's hard to really value every post. So I almost see the spectrum, like the more frequent the conversations and the more people that are just chatting, the less valuable it is, hardcore value. It's more engaging and fun. When we slow down the conversation and we have that threaded chat that's searchable and indexed, and I take time, like a lot of these discussion threads, people write a whole paragraph. They've thought about their answer, right? When I'm on the chat on my phone, it's like, yep, cool, meme, go. It's not as valuable as a long-term conversation, specifically for professional organizations. So when I think about the value of my professional organization having a topic-based discussion about surgery and surgeons are involved in it, I like that slow nature of once a day I get the digest, or when I'm ready, I post my paragraph. I thought about it, I chewed on it a little bit, right? And when I think about our committees having a conversation about the upcoming meeting, we're chatting around something, it's lower value, but it's still engaging. That's where the chat, I think, really fits in, comes in. We see equal success in both. It's our job as the community manager not to just say, here's the data, this is what we do. It's our job to understand what's the goal of a community. How do we measure, is it achieving that goal? And then we turn it on and let it go. And then we measure, is it achieving that goal? So if we look at our goal is to provide rich information to people for years to come. Are people ever going back and searching the Discords? Like, I don't, right now, right? No one's going back 6 months in Discord and be like, oh, he shared a meme, that's what I wanted, right? But you are going back and searching in the community because people took a lot of time to think about their post, really curate it. That's way richer content, I think, for the long term. Good question. They both have purposes, though. And I'll be frank, I think that the conversation is one type of community discussion. the threaded conversation that happens in email. There are significant other ways to engage in an online community, right? Think about YouTube and comments, very different type of community. Think about Reddit posts, upvoting, downvoting, comments, very different type of community. Some community platforms, as you're live editing a document, will show you there are other people in here. Some community platforms, if you're reading a PDF, go, did you know there's 3 other people reading this PDF right now? Click here to have a conversation with them. That makes a lot of sense. Hey, I noticed you're reading this GTP white paper. How are you going to use this? Right? That to me makes a lot of sense. So when we think about community, we sort of get stuck in these modalities. You have a higher logic community. It has discussion posts in the digest. You have Discord. It's live chat. But there's like 20 or 30 other ways to have a community that engages with each other. And all of these are really valid. I go back to what's the goal of my community? And are the tools I'm using serving that goal? Can I use analytics to measure that? And can I prove it? Because if you can't prove it, it didn't happen, right? Good question.
Let's see, and
Yeah.
I'd also like to follow up with another comment you made. You talked about giving a preset forum like introductions versus following the lead of community members.
Okay.
You also talked about the relative value of polls. So how would you suggest finding out what is in the interest of the community members if you're not relying on polls
Okay.
and you're not putting like an introduction
Yeah.
posting out?
So the question was, I've made some comments and I'm very opinionated, there's no doubt,
Really?
about the value of sort of describing a community and telling people what they're supposed to do, or polls and asking people what they're supposed to do. I don't think those are wrong. I think those are part of the recipe for success, right? Specifically, if we're paying for the community and sponsoring it, we should tell members what they're supposed to do here, right? We should put walls up and guide them, but we should understand if members don't do those things, it's not wrong. We should pay attention and listen. I think some of the best tactics I've seen on how to get a good community up and running from my community manager friends are just interviews. Just call the people up and ask them, right? When we were doing that banking community, we called a couple of the CFOs and said, why aren't you talking? And they literally said, what do you mean, why aren't we talking? Of course we're not going to talk. And we were like, well, what don't we understand? So this goes back to that face-to-face is highly valuable. Get some of the community managers and talk to them and ask them, what are you hoping to achieve? What do you want out of this community? What are your struggles and how can we help solve them? Right? I think that's a really good way to understand how to guide a community. Just ask the people who you want active in the community, go ask them what they want. Right? It's challenging for us sometimes in our digital world to move beyond our screen and an email and instant message. But there's so much we can accomplish on the phone just by talking to somebody with a video camera on that we can't accomplish in an email, right? Imagine you blast email everybody in the community and say, what do you want out of the community? You're going to get some answers back, right? But you're going to get a short version and you're going to get, it's out of context. It doesn't have the emotion attached to it versus, hey, can I get on the phone with you for 10 minutes? I want you to be in my community, but I want to provide value to you. How do I do that? Right? I think you're going to get some really, really good answers there. And I'm going to give my friend Lindsay Stark credit for that answer because she's a friend community manager that helped show me that tactic.
all right, well, thanks, Greg.